Hello, everyone. Welcome into Southeastern 14. I am Blayne Gilmer. Guys, we are going live here to talk about Kirby Smart making a massive, massive move here in the world of coaching, as Travaris Robinson has been hired away from Alabama to Georgia as the co-defensive coordinator. Now, some people are saying, well, Kalen DeBoer just got in here and he hadn't even had 24 hours on the job, things like that. Well, him and Travaris Robinson met last night is what's being reported out there. T-Rob didn't get the assurances that he was wanting, and he now is with the Georgia Bulldogs. And you're talking about a elite recruiter. You're talking about Travaris Robinson, a guy who helped sign Caleb Downs, who signed Vernon Hargraves at Florida, who signed Jordan Birch at South Carolina. So, guys, there is a lot going on in terms of, okay, Kalen DeBoer just got on the ground there at Tuscaloosa. He's already lost one of the guys that many people were looking at to be one of his pieces to give him the connections to the South that he needed, connections in recruiting, to be able to help sustain that current roster that is there. Because two things that we said were big keys for Kalen DeBoer as he comes on at Alabama is, in this first 30-day window, how does he go about recruiting the current roster there and keeping people on board? And then subsequently, how does he go about building relationships there when it comes to recruits in the South, recruits inside the state of Alabama? Remember, T-Rob had been at Auburn before. T-Rob had been at Florida. Robinson had also been at South Carolina, Will Muschamp. So a lot going on there, and we're going to talk about the dynamics of the Georgia staff here in a minute. But this is, make no mistake about it, this is the first major blow, in my opinion, for Kalen DeBoer and his tenure there at Alabama. I mean, that is a big deal to lose a guy like Travaris Robinson. A lot of Alabama fans were clamoring right away, please go ahead and hire T-Rob as the DC. Just name him the DC. And before he even does his introductory press conference at Alabama, here in about an hour and a half, Kirby Smart has already hired away one of the key pieces and probably the best coach that Nick Saban had on that staff there at Alabama underneath him. A huge move for Kirby Smart and company. But, guys, you can also make a huge move. Before we talk about what this does to Georgia's staff, we do want to remind you that you need to check out our partners at BetOnline. We were updating the BetOnline odds to everybody when Alabama was going through their coaching search, and Caleb DeBoer ended up being the late favorite, and he ended up getting that job. So you need to check out BetOnline for that kind of stuff, and also all your wagering news, information, predictions, odds, all that kind of stuff. The only people that don't get a lot of time off, guys, because they're constantly, even when they're not in season, they're constantly having to keep their bodies going as professional athletes, but that's also BetOnline. They don't take any days off. There's always sports going on for you to put a wager on. NFL is in the playoffs right now. The NBA is in midseason form. NHL is going on. There's always UFC fights coming up, so you can check out that. Odds, news, trends, predictions. BetOnline has all the sports wagering info available with desktop and mobile access at any time. Head over there today and get in on the action. BetOnline. You can use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, all caps BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. And, guys, we have to talk about, okay, what does this do to Georgia's staff now? Well, what it does is Will Muschamp was the co-defensive coordinator and safeties coach. He is now stepping down to be an analyst at Georgia, taking more time with his family. And that's not just some line he's throwing out there. He's actually taking more time to be with his family because his son Whit is going to be a quarterback at Vanderbilt this upcoming year. And this will give him more freedom as an analyst to kind of come and go and see different things and do things with his family. So that's a big deal for the Muschamps, but being an analyst still keeps him around the program and as a resource for Kirby Smart, for T-Rob, for Williams that just came on as the cornerback coach. So, there's a lot of benefits to that. And right now, here's the biggest thing. if I'm Kalen DeBoer, what I'm doing is I'm trying to counter this, but I'm trying to go to Glenn Schumann, who is an Alabama alum, and trying to go get him and bring him to Alabama. And that's what I would do if I was Kalen DeBoer. But I don't think that that's realistic that Schumann would leave Georgia to go to Alabama. Now, depends on how much money you offer, right? And what's inside. But I think Glenn Schumann is looking, his next role is going to be a head coaching role. And I don't think he's going to leave from Georgia to go to Alabama with Kalen DeBoer, who just got the head coaching job and is going to plan on being there for a while. So I don't think that would happen, but that would be the counter move that Travaris Robinson is if Kalen DeBoer could pluck Glenn Schumann away. But now you put Glenn Schumann, who's an X's and O's savant, and also does a good job recruiting inside linebackers, and then you take a guy like Travaris Robinson, who, like I said, was heavily involved in the recruitment of Caleb Downs, who was an All-American as a freshman, not a freshman All-American, and All-American as a freshman, which we predicted here on Southeastern 14. I watched him play in high school, told you he'd be the best safety I've seen in a long time. He's the best high school player I've ever seen in person. And I've coached against Deshaun Watson. I've played against Blake Sims. I played against Connor Shaw. I coached against AJ Johnson, a lot of these guys. And Caleb Downs was the best I'd ever seen in high school. So I'm telling you, when it comes down to it, now they've added Travaris Robinson. They've also added safety from Alabama, Jake Pope, who comes over to Georgia. He committed to Georgia out of the transfer portal. Now it's rumored that Caleb Downs is looking around, thinking about putting his paperwork in. And if that happens, then you would have to think this T-Rob hire by Georgia away from Alabama is a big move there. If that does happen, what happens with Justice Haynes? Does he enter the transfer portal? So there's some Alabama players that could end up getting poached from this roster, and Georgia will be a prime place for a lot of those guys. Kirby Smart is also smart in this because he is bringing on an elite recruiter. Like I said, Caleb Downs at Alabama, Jordan Birch when Robinson was at South Carolina under Will Muschamp, Vernon Hargraves when he was at Florida, 3 5-stars right off the bat. And then now in Alabama's current class, they just signed Jalen Mbakwe, who's a 5-star athlete that's going to Alabama. You had T-Rob heavily involved in that one as well. So, guys, there's just a lot going on here when it comes to this move. Also, I think this sets up well. Georgia, you're always looking 2 and 3 years ahead if you're Kirby Smart. Eventually, Glenn Schumann is going to get a head coaching job. And when he does get that head coaching job, now you have a guy who is a young, hungry coach that is willing to take over and be a lead play caller and a elite recruiter in T-Rob, and that sets you up for going on in the future. So here's the thing. You knew that Kirby Smart was not going to just sit idly by as things happen with Nick Saban leaving. You knew that he wasn't just going to say, okay, well, we'll just see what happens and kind of sit around. He knew T-Rob could come available, and he went on to capitalize on that. And I think that was a big deal. Now, if you're Kalen DeBoer, these next 28 days that you have of Alabama, 27 days of Alabama players having the ability to enter the portal because of Nick Saban's retiring, that is massive. That is massive. You must hold serve if you are Kalen DeBoer, and you got teams like Georgia, like Tennessee, like Florida, like Texas, everybody in the SEC looking to poach those rosters. Ole Miss. I mean, there's lots of guys that if players are thinking about going in the portal or go into the portal officially, man, it's going to get interesting. So we'll see what happens. Des Ricks is going into the portal, and Des Ricks, as Andy Stowe tells us, Des Ricks going in the portal. Well, guess who recruited Des Ricks? Travaris Robinson. Now, I don't know how many spots that Georgia has available in that secondary. I know that they are losing guys. They lost Kamari Lassiter. Of course, they lost Tyke Smith, and they lost Javon Bullard. So a lot of guys with a lot of experience leaving. But that is a huge, huge deal with Travaris Robinson. And here's why it's a huge deal too. And I'm surprised that Kalen DeBoer didn't just, go ahead and pull the trigger to make Travaris Robinson a defensive coordinator, a key part of his staff, is because he has coached in the SEC. He's coached at Florida. Okay. He's coached at South Carolina, defensive coordinator, in fact, at South Carolina, and he's coached at Auburn. So he knows the dynamics of the league. He has those relationships with high school coaches. He's been around and seen these places where high profile players come in to a program like Alabama. And I'm just shocked that he didn't, I guess, work a little bit harder to keep him in the fold. Now, we saw that the very first thing that Hugh Freeze did was trying to secure Cadillac Williams. Now, subsequently, just this week, Cadillac Williams has moved on, and they've also had a couple other coaches move on there from Auburn. But I'm just saying, when it gets done, when it's down to it, Hugh Freeze knew early on he had to keep Cadillac Williams just to kind of keep continuity on that roster as much as possible, and also to attack recruiting early on. And I think Kalen DeBoer would have been well served if he had been able to keep Travaris Robinson at least for year one. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Chris Taylor says, wonder if a different hire would have hit differently. Maybe it would have. Also, do we think that Schumann only leaves for? I think so. I think Glenn Schumann is head coaching job or bust. I mean, Glenn Schumann could have been the defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. Let me say that again. He could be right now preparing for a playoff game as the defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, and Glenn Schumann turned that down. Okay. So I think he was offered it. I think it was a deal where there was interest on both sides, and I don't think he ended up going. I think he wants to end up being a head coach at the college level, or maybe even at the NFL level. Who knows? But I think Glenn Schumann is looking for that next jump there, and I don't think he'll go laterally right now. And make no mistake about it. Okay, I think when you're talking about this, that Georgia and Texas are now on par, as good a jobs as Alabama. And before Saban arrived, Georgia and Texas were both better jobs than Alabama. Saban made Alabama into a great job, okay? Because look at this. I put this graphic up yesterday. Record after Bryant and before Saban. So from 1983 to 2006, Alabama was 195 and 96, a 67% winning percentage. Okay, that was a far cry from where Saban has taken things at Alabama, with well into the high 80s, 90s, whatever his winning percentage was. It was crazy. But sprinkled in through all those years at Alabama, 7-loss season, 6-loss season, then they jump up and win 10, and then another 6 or 7 loss right mix in there, 4 or 5 loss, another 10-win season. So it was irregular, up and down. You look at a program like Georgia under Mark Richt and Texas under Mac Brown, it was consistently 10 wins, 10 wins, 10 wins. I mean, just going through there competing. So I think that Kalen DeBoer has a lot to prove. I think that this would have been a big move to keep Travaris Robinson on board with Alabama, at least for year one. But now he's got to get also too. Kalen DeBoer's defenses at Washington were awful. Okay. And I think that has to be a concern. The defense is not very good. Yeah. S. Hobson confirming Des Ricks has entered the portal from Alabama, and that is someone that Travaris Robinson recruited. So again, everything's connected here. We'll see what happens. Let's see. Yeah. Major hire exaggerate. DeBoer will bring a crowd. Don't you worry. From people to Saban is the only one. Okay, you can say what you want. Kirby Smart just made a massive hire. That's a big blow. In my opinion, this was Kalen DeBoer's first loss as an Alabama coach. Okay, that's how significant of a move this is, because of the ties that Travaris Robinson has to that roster, the ties that he has in the recruiting world around the SEC, and now bringing him over with Deontay Williams, the cornerback coach that came from USC as an elite recruiter to Georgia, still having Will Muschamp around the program, Travaris Robinson now in the fold, and plus Kirby Smart. He's a DB and DB himself and a DB coach by trade under Saban. And then you had Glenn Schumann, who spent 6 years under Saban with Kirby before he came to Georgia, and now has been, Kirby's right-hand man every step of the way. So I don't think that you can over-exaggerate how big of a hire this is. I think it's massive. And of course, Jake Pope has already came over, as I mentioned, and now we'll see what happens with Caleb Downs. We'll see what happens with Des Ricks going forward. It is a big, big hire for Kirby Smart and a big blow to Kalen DeBoer, in my opinion. I think when we're talking about this, I'm not saying anybody's going to fall off the face of the earth. There's enough talent base. And like I said, Nick Saban made Alabama into an elite job. But it's a whole lot different. And here's why it's different. Even if Alabama is as well coached as they've ever been, even if they're fundamentally sound and things like that, not looking across the sideline and not preparing all week for opposing coaches and for the team and seeing the greatest of all time to be across from you on that sideline, it's a psychological barrier that has now dropped for other teams. The mental edge that Nick Saban alone had on teams in terms of his reputation preceding itself and what he was able to do and stuff like that, the mental game was already won for Alabama. A lot of times they had an advantage before they even got off the bus. Okay. I'm just telling you that was truth. And we saw the in-game adjustments that Saban was able to make at critical times throughout his career, especially against Kirby Smart at times. I think this has to be a big confidence boost for people across the SEC. And I think this is a shot across the bow before Kalen DeBoer has even had his press conference with Kirby Smart saying, hey, this isn't some game. We're playing for keeps here. And I think Kirby Smart with a massive, massive move for Georgia by hiring Travaris Robinson away from Alabama. So guys, those are my thoughts on T-Rob getting hired away from Alabama to Georgia less than 24 hours after Kalen DeBoer is named the new head coach at Alabama and the replacement to Nick Saban. We'll see where things go from here. It's only going to get more interesting. And I think when it comes down to it, we're going to have a lot of interesting matchups between Georgia and Alabama going forward. Remember, Kalen DeBoer's first SEC game as a coach at Alabama, he welcomes Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs into Bryant-Denny Stadium. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Remember, we're presented by BetOnline. We'll catch you guys next time to talk more Georgia, more Alabama, more SEC. That's all we do here, right here on Southeastern 14.